Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Billboard. I am your co-host, Greg Wise, founder and CCO of OneScreen. I'm here with my running mate and fellow co-founder, Charlie Riley, and we have a very special guest today, a very special guest. I know we often say that, but this is so special because this guy has actually given us some money to operate our business. Rob Biederman, who is an investor in OneScreen. If you weren't picking up what I was throwing down there. Rob, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you on.
Great to be on. Thanks for having me, guys.
For those folks, and Rob, I'm going to have you give your background, but for those folks listening, we do mean special guest. Rob is a very accomplished professional. He's currently managing partner of Asymmetric, an early stage venture firm in New York City, San Francisco, and Boston. Prior to founding Asymmetric, Rob co-founded and was co-CEO for almost a decade at Catalent Technologies, the market leader for enabling companies to frictionlessly deploy talent. He's currently Catalent's chairman. Prior to founding Catalent, he was an investor at Goldman Sachs and Bain. Rob was also a Harvard Business School executive fellow. He's also an author of a book called Reimagining Work, Strategies to Disrupt Talent, Lead Change, and Win with a Flexible Workforce. He graduated from Princeton, and he's also HBS, or I should say also HBS as a baked scholar, which, Rob, you're going to have to tell me what that is. But
Here's what I'd say about my career has basically had three phases. I was an investor in private equity at Goldman and Bain Capital. I then founded a company called Catalent and then started a venture capital firm called Asymmetric. Each of those, certainly the first two phases of my career, are what brought me to OneScreen, both as an investor personally and then an investor from the fund. What we look for at Asymmetric and certainly at Bain Capital were spaces where you have crazy repeat buy behavior. People just keep coming back, but very low customer satisfaction. And for me, the out-of-home industry as a buyer at Catalent was peak of that. You had this very fragmented industry where we knew the ROI was fantastic, but we couldn't scale our buying in the medium because it was such a pain in the ass to buy. So we worked with Clear Channel and Outfront and all the majors. And it was almost impossible to, one, understand the results specifically. So people would close $1 million deal with us at Catalent and they'd say, we'd ask, how did you learn about us? And they'd say, I saw your billboard on I-35 in Dallas or I-9 in Boston. And yet because those vendors didn't offer tracking and measurement and buying was so disjointed and disconnected, we never knew if we were buying the best inventory. And we had no idea how it was performing, except we were in the room with the customer and they'd say, I actually heard about you guys when I first saw your billboard, which was obviously awesome. So fantastic. The company got started. Obviously, I met the founding team, I think in the spring of 2021, just when I was thinking about transitioning from Catalent to Asymmetric. And it's been a wonderful partnership with you guys for almost 4 years now.
no, it's been an incredible ride. And I remember you telling us that story when we brought you the idea and the concept. And what it sounded like, and what it sounds like just based on the story you just told, is that billboards work, have to help marketers access them in a better way, more modernized way, and leverage data, which is obviously what we do. And yeah, it's interesting. It's curious, Rob, how you think about brand in general, because at the time when we first connected and you invested in OneScreen, part of the thesis at the time was, hey, digital marketing is becoming a little bit harder. It's over optimized. Digital channels are now seeing diminishing returns. We were at the beginning stages of that. The thesis was, we think there's going to be a revert back to old school tried and true methods of advertising, aka billboards. Where do you see things now, and how do you look at in marketing as a whole?
Companies want to acquire customers, and that's been true for literally hundreds of years. The challenge, I think, on digital marketing is it's so easy. It's so obvious. Anybody on this call, anybody listening could go start a GA or a Facebook or a Meta marketing account with your personal credit card and be advertising in 20 minutes. The challenge is, one, that the casino is perpetually rigged. There's a range of how good the ROAS can be, and it can never be better than that because it gets better. Other people will flood in. So if you think of people who sell bathing suits on Instagram, ability to market to the customer that's buying bathing suits on Instagram is perpetually going to be as competitive as it is good. So the advantage of out of home is that it's scarce. It's not abundant. And because it is more difficult, just as Apple and Google and others have made it more difficult to track what's happening on online marketing, the offline marketing world, the out of home industry has made it way easier to track what's happening. So you have this kind of perpetually rigged casino against you in online advertising. People only do because it's really easy and it's infinitely scalable. Google or Facebook will let you spend millions of dollars if you want. Offline, if you can identify, and obviously I think you can do that through OneScreen, if you can identify the best places to deploy dollars, you can block out the ideal inventory and you can get perfect trackability on that. And there is a set of customers, if you think of everybody has their ad blockers turned off. At this point, I think basically all the marketing and social media is essentially noise. What you can't ignore is when you're driving a car, you have to have your eyes open, you have to be looking. You see a billboard or you're on the subway where typically you can't be on your phone. There are so many interesting media and channels now for out of home that are also becoming digitized at the same time. So if you're thinking about contextual or rapidly updated outdoor marketing, there's never been a better ability to do that. And yet marketers are so locked into their existing ways. And if you're the pay-per-click marketer at a given company, you're probably never going to say, hey, we should think about out of home because you are the pay-per-click marketer. You're the performance marketer. So I think there will be a new job title, which actually be out of home performance marketer rather than digital performance marketer. And that's our core customer.
I think you see that with some of the asks that marketing teams are being looked upon to do now. It's not just like demand gen is just a broad term, but when you think about what out of home is, part of the reason why we called this podcast Beyond the Billboard is there's so many executions beyond billboards. It's almost like field marketing and street team activation. So I think you're seeing more mature marketing teams expand the use cases that would fall under out of home. And I think that's where we've seen really good success with customers who want to go beyond the billboard. They're going to use maybe a really great standout, huge billboard, but they're also thinking about, the transit ads, the digital out of home. So yeah, spot on. I think you're absolutely right there, Rob. One thing I did want to ask you about, because you did talk about this before, was, and you used the swimsuit example. I think a lot of assumptions around out of home is it's great for maybe D2C brands or B2C brands, but we've seen a lot of success with B2B brands. What's your thought on that? Because you've worked with firms that or the companies you've invested in or we've seen a renaissance with B2B brands. Could you talk a little bit about what you've seen there and what your thoughts are on that space?
Yeah, for sure. And the Catalent, the company I founded and I'm still chairman of, is very much a B2B brand. We loved out of home because it allowed us to add a layer in ABM or account-based marketing. So typically your vectors for account-based marketing are certainly targeted digital events, probably very high-end direct mail, direct FedEx to desk. What we'd like to mix in was what I think was incredibly thoughtful. We would actually figure out where the executives at the companies that we were targeting lived and just absolutely bombard them out of home, typically on their commute. So we knew that folks who were executives at Walmart lived in these 3 typical zip codes in broader Bentonville, or executives there's this one office park called Legacy Place in Plano, Texas, where you just have an unbelievable number of Fortune 500 companies. We did a perma buyout of the trash cans and most of the street furniture outside all of the stores in the Fortune 500 headquarters there. You want to do in marketing is do the thing that's unexpected. So everybody expects that out of home is going to be alcoholic beverages and concerts and other events and things that have really broad population level marketability. I think when and you can see this when you're driving on 101 outside SFO, surely anybody who's driven 101 in the last 20 years would believe that that's very much B2B, because what you have there is all of the tech buyers are driving up and down from San Francisco to Menlo Park or Palo Alto every day, or they're going to SFO. Surely B2B companies, software companies have figured out that's a great space. Outside of that zone, which is the most expensive advertising in the world for B2B, you really have very few people doing it, but B2B buyers are everywhere. And particularly if you're targeting individual humans, you typically know where they live.
It's awesome. It's such a great use case. Rob, do you remember, because one of the questions we get asked all the time is how much should we spend in out of home? And it's one of those questions that the truth is it depends. Do you remember what kind of budgets you guys were playing with at the time?
Oh, we were a small company. We were probably only spending low single-digit millions on marketing, and I think most of it was going towards out of home. We never really found another channel for ABM that had a great payback. I just think kind of digital advertising or pay-per-click or social in the ABM context makes no sense, because your enterprise buyer is not clicking on ads. But I think when you have billboards, it gives you real heft as your company. If you think of the companies that are advertising on the 101, they're the most important technology companies in America, hitting the most sophisticated and discerning buyers. And so we're hoping, I think at this company, and certainly in my tenure as a director here, folks will realize that out of home can be an incredibly cost-effective channel. And what I encourage people to think through is when we first thought about the out of home strategy, we'd hired a brand marketer from Procter and Gamble, and she and I collaborated on this strategy, and she'd been used to selling soap and laundry detergent. And there was a really nice kind of puzzle piecing there of a disruptive new channel. And that's obviously why we ended up investors here, because I saw firsthand how screwed up the industry was when you tried to buy directly.
Do you remember how you guys measured success?
Yeah, this is obviously the pre-OneScreen world. We had to be incredibly judicious about asking customers when they closed a project. Our size of the prize there was measured in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, but we had to be incredibly choiceful in saying, how did you first hear about us? Think back. And very often I saw a billboard for Catalent or a prior entity, Hourly Nerd.
One of the things Charlie and I talk about a lot, almost on every episode, I'd say, Charlie, is this idea that, so I would consider you, Rob, progressive in how you thought about an out of home at the time when you did it with Catalent. Obviously, you investing in, I think that says a lot as well. But truthfully, right now, we're seeing the pendulum swing back, right? From performance only marketers and performance only marketing strategies to now incorporating offline. This idea of brand is not something that was top of mind for a lot of marketers the last decade. And now it is. How would you help a marketer? So now you've played the role of CEO, chairman, investor, right? You sit on multiple boards. What would you recommend a marketer who wants to engage in out of home in brand? How would you help them sell that through internally to the executive team? And
I think the first thing is being really open and honest with both yourself and your team, as well as your executives, about what you can and can't do with online pay-per-click. Any kind of sort of modern performance marketing subsequent to 2021 or 2020 has huge trackability challenges because of the privacy issues laid out, created and encouraged by Apple. Being able to put performance marketing in a box and say, here's what it can and can't do. If we're selling t-shirts or diet pills online and we can hit people right at the point of purchase with a low ASP sale, and we can do that effectively, we can run for a little bit. The challenge is you at some point have to go out and get customers that aren't looking for you. And the best way to get customers who aren't looking for you is to interrupt them in their daily path. So you have to hit them when they're getting on the subway, when they're at their kid's t-ball game, when they're driving on the interstate. And if you're not doing that, you're range bound in how much you can move quantity purchased. Retargeting has a huge ceiling on it because retargeting only works if somebody's already been to you first. And the reality is most pay-per-click when people aren't looking for you is a total waste of money. And it's become so expensive. And if you're having success with it, your competitors will emulate you. Whereas if you're the first to get out ahead and you're the first kind of B2B marketer to sign up blocks at a conference, block out every piece of inventory in the neighborhood of a conference, that's it for that conference. It's not like somebody else can outbid you. There's one sign outside the entrance to the conference. If you can be the first bidder on a complete game changer. I think as a marketer these days, you have to paint a more expansive vision of what you're doing for your executives to want to allocate dollars to it. And I think we've just been stuck in this performance marketing pay-per-click trap for way too long.
Two things that you just said that make a lot, or you said already, that make a lot of sense. It's one, the reliance on just the ease of some of those digital channels, but there's a trade-off to that. And I think that's also conditioned marketers to think that you have to track every single thing. And in reality, you can't. Even digitally, you can't. But like you said, anecdotally, you've got a sales team, you've got a process to add. You had a sales team to ask those questions, like, how did you find out about us? How did you hear about us? There is attribution. You could put all that together. Even the example you gave around someone seeing the Catalent billboards before, I bet if you guys were looking back at this, you would see an organic search lift go up because people saw those billboards and they went right away and Googled, who's Catalent? What do they do? So there's ways that you can put all that together that I think tells that compelling story. So you go to a board, you go to CFO, CEO and say, here's an idea. We haven't tried this yet. We're going to use an expert to help us do this, which is, I think, a big part of the battle of, like you said it before, if you try it yourself, it can be difficult, but we're going to use expertise just like we would do for SEO or for any other channel. And here's what we can realistically expect from it. But like you were saying before, those CPMs are going to be pretty impactful when you start to look at an overall out-of-home buy. I think that's very useful for marketers to think about from your perspective in a sense of how do you sell this up? But I think the other thing, and you've talked a little bit about this before, is that whole ABM play and that specialization, I think that's one of the areas that most B2B marketers don't associate out of home as a way that they can stand out. But like you said, everyone's doing the same thing. They're doing the same email, they're doing the same direct mail. But if you can find really impactful inventory in the right places that people are driving by, the executives are, like you said, outside their kids' games, that can be a game changer. Even if they're not ready to buy right now, but they remember that brand and they've seen it and they've seen the impression several times, that recall is there for them to come back to you.
Totally agree with that.
I think what you're doing right now, Charlie, is convincing Rob to spend all our marketing budget on billboards.
I've been in favor of OneScreen marketing being spent on out of home since the beginning.
Coming soon, folks. And there's more beyond the billboard. Literally, there's other forms of out of home. We talk about billboards because oftentimes the easiest thing people to understand. Rob, it's been a really interesting journey, and I think that out of home is really at its infancy, quite frankly, and we're really just getting started. And I think that what's interesting, because you talk about the Catalent use case and we talk about ABM, B2B, both B2C and B2B, right? There's tons of use cases. Charlie, one thing that was interesting, I think I've told you this story, which is we've had B2B companies, one in particular a couple of years ago did a campaign. They did a campaign in Utah, Salt Lake City. The sales reps that had the territory in Salt Lake City saw an influx of deals, and their deals they were accelerated. They generated higher deals, and there was internal conflict. There was legitimately conflict on the sales team because what you're doing is providing air cover. If you're a salesperson out there, or if you're a marketing person with a sales team, what salesperson is going to say no to a billboard in their territory? It's all a net positive, and it does work time and time again.
Yeah.
So appreciate you sharing the anecdote, because it does work.
Yep. Yeah, of course.
Rob, yeah, any last thoughts that you'd want to share for someone? Usually it's marketers, it's agency buyers that are listening. You gave some great ideas in terms of how to sell up, but any other thoughts in terms of what you've seen in the environment, maybe what things happening in the next few months or the next few years, but any thoughts on, you've been around a lot of different areas and you obviously have a lot of knowledge around marketing. Any final thoughts that you think just to give out of home a try if they've never executed a campaign before? And I think by now they'd understand, listening to you, where to possibly start, to give one of us a call. But anything you could add to that for someone who's maybe on the fence thinking about out of home?
Yeah, look, the great thing about out of home is it's testable and scalable. So you can start with a very small amount of dollars. You can see if it works. You can do one thing we love doing it at Catalent was we do a test. We do an A/B test between two cities. So we do every tactic but out of home in Chicago, and in Dallas we do all the same tactics and add out of home, and we'd measure the incremental lift that all of our campaigns got. The thing that I probably should have mentioned earlier is it takes so many times for a new brand to crack into people's perception that even if you're hitting them with performance marketing, even if you're hitting them with direct mail, being able to layer on top of that the just constant naming and the impression creation on top of those two channels can really, so if you don't get them on performance marketing, they remember your name. So you may even actually see that they convert on a pay-per-click situation. It was only because they saw you earlier that day while driving their car. And if you're doing a really good job, you can actually hit all of those points at the same time. And that's where it's the omni-channel ABM that I think is the holy grail of marketing and where things are headed.
We're in 100% agreement on that. We've talked about that on probably every episode. Yeah, we appreciate it. And this is great, Rob. You bring great insight and great advice to us as a team. So we appreciate not only what you bring to us, but also the insight you've just brought to a bunch of listeners. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, we'll continue to have other guests on that are coming from all different perspectives around brand marketing, out of home. It's great to hear a bunch of different voices, because I think we all agree that it's a necessary and useful channel. It's an education for a lot of marketers, and we appreciate your thoughts on this. So thanks for joining us, Rob. And for those who are tuning in, subscribe to wherever you're listening to this, because we've got plenty more episodes to come. For Greg and myself, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Appreciate it.